Welcome to this week's edition of the Untold Story. Today, I am speaking with Sheriff Paul Penzone about an issue that has affected so many Americans and really has impacted our country so deeply, and that is the issue of fentanyl and the way it is impacting our teenagers, adults as well, people taking drugs that they think are one thing that turn out to be laced with this incredibly poisonous element that is coming in from China, through Mexico. It's a very serious issue, and Sheriff Penzone is on the front lines of it. So, Sheriff, thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me to have this very serious conversation. It is a very difficult time, and I believe that this issue is one that adversely affects our nation in so many ways.
So let's get to the heart of why this is happening. I mean, a few years ago, nobody heard of fentanyl. So how did this happen? How did this become such a problem for our country in the big picture?
Well, with your permission, I'd like to give a little bit of context just to give you some perspectives. I've been in law enforcement for nearly 35 years, and I would tell you a good portion of my career was actually spent in narcotics undercover. So it was at the state and federal level. And during that time frame, it was when I would tell you crack cocaine was one of the more significant drugs. Methamphetamine was really surging. This was the 90s. And heroin was always kind of this undercurrent of drugs. And what you see in that environment is there is always a new drug coming down the pike. There's always some other way to try to turn an addiction into a profit. And what we see now with fentanyl, in my opinion, is probably the most significant and dangerous public health and public safety crisis to affect our nation as it relates to drug distribution. Being a border state, I'm in Maricopa County, and we're, I believe, the fourth largest county in the nation, and we're not on the border, but we're in the center of Arizona. We see the traffic coming from south of the border. We see it being developed here within our nation, but the properties are so addictive and so dangerous that it affects all walks of life.
Well, that's great in terms of your background, and obviously you have spent decades digging into this. What's different about this? Because I remember back in the 80s, the crack cocaine addiction all over the streets of New York City, crack pipes everywhere, and then over time, that went away. This feels different in that it is being taken as, in disguise of a prescription drug. You've got middle school students who are picking it up on social media. Talk to me about the nature of this drug in particular, based on all your experience, and who is the driving factor in getting this into our country and to our kids?
Well, if we talk about it just on a, and I'm not a chemist, but I'll talk about the chemical aspect of it, it's highly addictive. And because it can be produced in so many different ways, meaning no two pills will be the same, the danger of what you could be ingesting could be lethal on first try. So you have highly addictive, highly dangerous, could be deadly. As a nation, there are certain things that contribute to addiction or the ease of distribution. Pills are obviously easily distributed. They can come in high volume in small packages, but because we're a nation, this is just my opinion, where if you think of everything from vitamins to prescription pills to, anything that we ingest orally, it's a comfortable practice. So then for our children to see this, it doesn't have that same feel of danger as if you're using a needle or you're smoking from a pipe. So the familiarity, the comfort level of taking a pill and not seeing it as a threat or a hazard to you means the first time you try it, almost feels comfortable. But the impact that it has, whether it's so addictive or it is so dangerous that it could take your life, that's something that most people aren't prepared for. But it's become a social practice at all ages and all walks of life. No one is immune to this. And because of that, and now keep in mind, I not only patrol and I myself, but my agency patrol over 9,000 square miles, but we have, I think, the second largest jail system in the nation. So the volume of overdoses and deaths that we see in incarcerated populations where you think they shouldn't get their hands on drugs has skyrocketed for us. And what is the driving force? It is the fundamental of supply and demand. If as a nation, we don't take the criminalization and the proactive efforts to reduce drug addiction more seriously, we become the highest demand space, and the supply will come from anyone that's willing to produce, because it turns into dollars. So the blood, sweat, and tears is about profit, and because as a nation we're too comfortable with suddenly decriminalizing drugs or just kind of diminishing the severity of the impact, we're an easy target for, whether it's south of the border or whether it's produced inside the country or whether it comes from other parts of the world. We're the demand central.
Well put. In terms of how it feels more comfortable for kids to take a pill in terms of vitamins and painkillers and all of these things. I mean, when I was a kid, we were always taught you don't ever touch any prescription drug unless it was prescribed to you, unless mom and dad actually give it to you. But we've definitely entered an environment where people are passing these things around, and there is a casual nature to it that is so dangerous with regard to this. In terms of the border, because we talk about fentanyl a lot in terms of the border, and China and Mexico and their role, and you say we're providing the demand, which I get, and they are stepping up to the plate because it's a huge money-making operation. Talk to me a little bit about your understanding of that side of it.
Well, this is a complex issue, yet it's a fundamentally unsophisticated issue. We have to decide who we want to be as a nation. And when I say this, it's interesting because my office was highly involved in politics. And when I took this office, one of my personal commandments was I refuse to allow politics to play a part in public safety. So when I do this, I look at it through X's and O's, and I say, on a local level, then extending to a national need, what do we have to be as a nation to be safe? So we have to first and foremost identify where the threats come from. So whether it is violent crime, property crime, drug addiction, drug distribution, whatever category you speak of, we have to be adamant about our opposition to that. So first and foremost, where does the threat come from? If we have threats that are coming from outside of our nation, how do we mitigate, suppress, and eliminate the potential for that threat to affect us? How do we take a more aggressive approach to attacking those who are attacking our nation? Then we look at it internally and we say, okay, what are we willing to do in a sophisticated manner to address this problem and be solution oriented? There are people that must be incarcerated for their crimes, even if they are drug related crimes, because what they do, the devastation of a nation is considerable. We can't dismiss that. Then what do we do to educate our children so that they're making sound decisions? Because our children go to school every day and learn about math and science and English and all the things that we learn fundamentally. It's important. But if they fail a drug test, meaning if they take that drug the first time, everything they earn academically becomes irrelevant. So we have to have an investment in educating our children on life skills to get them through these momentary challenges that can be life altering. And then we talk about, the issue of who are we going to be as we lead by example, meaning we do not believe in these practices, and anyone who poses a threat to our children, our families, must be held accountable. So it is being sound and safe and having barriers and borders and sophisticated processes to identify, catch, and prosecute criminals, being sophisticated in educating our community as to why this is so threatening, and then being consistent in everything that we do so that no matter what walk of life you come from, whether it's politics, religion, color of skin, whatever it may be, safety for our children has to be the leading priority without any interference. So I think that we really need to kind of recalibrate who we are as a people in this nation and make dramatic changes to improve public safety and public health.
With regard to this recent bust by your Phoenix Police Department, 1 million fentanyl pills in that bust, and you had 2 arrests, 26-year-old Francisco Delgado, 21-year-old Jose Molina. Tell me about that bust and the apprehension of these 2 individuals.
Gosh, Martha. So just to give you context here, so I actually spent my career with the Phoenix Police Department, 21 years there before I became the Maricopa County Sheriff. So that particular investigation was headed up by a different agency than the one that I run. The familiarity that I do have is I will tell you that it is consistent, similar with other major seizures we've had. The volume may be a little bit different. What I will tell you is this. Everyone and anyone who believes the opportunity to traffic in these drugs right now is so profitable that the reward is worth the risk is getting involved in that practice, in that business. We had a seizure of nearly 100,000 pills just recently that involved, if I remember correctly, one of the suspects was barely above the legal age. I think he was 19, and the other suspect was either 16 or 17. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that it is an easily transportable drug. It can be concealed, without much complication. It comes in forms that look, like candy, Skittles and other things like that. So it's appealing to children. But the idea of a monetary gain of a considerable amount, while kind of overwhelming law enforcement during a time when anything we're not talking about is where's law enforcement on this. We have seen the opportunity to recruit and retain employees in this profession dwindle to a level I never expected.